right, great. I'm going to get started because the first bit is, things you've already seen and things you already know. And I want to make sure we have plenty of time for those peer conversations and for our content today. So welcome back, everyone. Thanks so much for being here. Welcome to Recruitment Boot Camp 4.0. This session will be on interviews and on-site visits. This is the part you already know. We have our housekeeping, of course. Remember that this session is being recorded and the recording will be posted on the discussion board. That said, anything in your breakout groups is not being recorded. So that's good to know. We encourage you to be present and on camera if possible. Again, as you've heard us say, we totally understand Zoom fatigue. So if you don't want to be on camera, we get it. We do encourage you to be on camera in those breakout groups for those peer conversations. But we also want to make sure that you're doing what is best for you. You're welcome to use the chat box, but because we're a group that is getting to know each other and has gotten to know each other over the last many weeks, we want you to feel comfortable just unmuting yourself and sharing with the group and adding questions, comments, or other thoughts. Of course, message Mariah Blake through this platform if you're experiencing any technical difficulties. If that's not working for whatever reason, you can email her at mblake@clinicians.org. And then please, as always, complete the evaluation after the session. It really helps us continue to grow this program, grow our learning collaboratives in general. And of course, it's really important to our funder, BIPIC. So we really appreciate that. So as always, we want to start with a little icebreaker. This is a quiz, a 3-question quiz. And I thought since we were talking about interviews today, we should, I have some fun fact quizzes about interviewing and how people are getting jobs and who's getting jobs, etc. So you can scan that code with your phone, or you can enter menti.com and then enter the code 3824-7440. Again, that's 3824-7440. And then it will ask you for a name. You don't have to put your real name. You could do a nickname. And then we'll get started on these in a moment. So I'm going to give everyone just another second or two to get connected to the Mentimeter. And then I'm gonna stop sharing, and then I'm gonna share this screen. Okay, all right. It looks like we've got our contenders. We've got our little emojis representing us. All right, so this is the first question. Ready? Yes, that's fine. What % of the global workforce will millennials and Gen Z make up by 2025? You've got 17 seconds to answer. 48%, 56%, 75%, or 100%. What do you think it is? 8, 7. All right. So we've got a bunch of people think it's 56. It's going to be 75%. Wow. There's so many millennials and Gen Z in the world. All right. Our next question is, what % of companies use social media platforms to look up candidates? 92, 78, 36, or 12? All right. Again, one right answer, but great answers across the board. All right, and then our final question, if it will let me go to the next one, is what % of candidates get rejected due to an overall lack or overall confidence level, voice quality, or lack of smile? 63%, 39%, 47%, or 18%? Wow, a great spread again, and it's 39%. Great job, everybody. What a fun quiz. And we'll see this leaderboard. Why is it being, there we go. Wow, here's our leaderboard. Dorothy ran away with the points. Wow, great job, team. Incredible. Wow, there's confetti and everything. Incredible job. All right, great. Cool. Well, yeah, I found those and I thought they were interesting and I thought it'd be a fun way for us to get our minds starting to think about interviewing and how people get jobs, etc. So we've already gone through these answers, but yeah, quickly we'll just, so the future workforce is here according to Gen Z interview statistics. Millennials currently encompass about half the American workforce, but the number of Gen Z and millennial employees is expected to increase by that 25% by 2025. So good for us to know, to think about who our future workforce is, and 2025 is not far away. So there's that. And then, yeah, this statistic was really interesting. I thought that folks do tend to look up their candidates on social media. I remember when I was in high school, I got warned about this all the time. They had to be really careful what you post on social media because companies are going to look it up and see what kind of life you're living. But apparently about 92% of companies do look folks up, whether that be on LinkedIn, which I don't know if that counts for me as like looking someone up on a social media platform since it's the work one, but I thought it was an interesting statistic. And then, yeah, that 39% of folks just get rejected from confidence, voice, or lack of smile. It's fascinating. All right, so now we're going to jump into those breakout groups and have a chat. But before we do, I just wanted to check in to see if anyone had any questions about the homework or anything that you wanted to chat about as a group before we go into breakout groups. Not seeing anyone unmute, and I don't see anything in the chat. Of course, feel free to continue thinking about it, and after you come back from your breakout groups, we can do that again, or we can, if anything came up, feel free to ask. Our prompts for your breakout groups are to think about, or having done the homework, share with your peers how you're already successfully using social media and advertising in your recruitment efforts. Think about any challenges you're having in this brainstorm or in this area, and then brainstorm with your peers about potential solutions. Of course, these are just prompts. If there's other things on your mind that you want to talk about with your colleagues and peers, please feel free to bring them up. Mariah will send you into breakout rooms momentarily, but you've all done this before, so you know the drill. Of course, feel free to let us know if you have any questions, and we'll see you soon. Welcome back, folks. We're going to give everyone from the other rooms a moment to finish wrapping up. So feel free to take some grounding breaths, sip of water, just take a minute to chill. I'll have a sip of water while we're talking about it. This was once bubbly water. It's lost all its bubbles. All right, the room should be closing now, so people should be back soon, shortly, as our dear friend Jim McCrae likes to say. I remember the first time I saw Jim McCrae at a conference, like just walking around, and I got like flustered, like I was seeing a celebrity. He's not a celebrity, but he's a celebrity in our world.
I love that Intel commercial where I don't know who the person is, but obviously he's someone in that world who created something, and like everybody's screaming for him, and there's all these geeky people, like geeky computer people, like this amazing person, and nobody else knows.
No, yeah, right. That's how I was, but with Jim McCrae. So yeah. All right, welcome back. Is that everyone, Mariah? All the rooms are closed, right?
Yep, everyone should be back.
Okay, great. Well, we've got a smaller group today, which is okay, that's fine. So is there anything anyone wants to share from the breakout groups? Did you have any incredible breakthroughs? What are some challenges folks are dealing with? We'll just hear from a couple folks. And or if it was outside the prompt. That's cool too.
So our group actually didn't use social media very much, just because of limitations with our different employers. So I thought that was interesting because I thought I was a one-off. Our marketing department kind of controls all of that, and they're not necessarily helpful
Yeah.
in, or up to date. And we actually have a third party that controls our website, so that causes another source of delays. So I've actually removed all of the candidate information from our website because it
Okay.
was just too out of date.
So do you just put it on like sites like Indeed and LinkedIn and stuff like that? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And also sounds frustrating. So I'm sorry
Yeah.
yeah, it's really hard when we are in these systems where it's like we're just not able to even things that we know are best practices like just aren't possible because of the way things are set up. I'm sorry, that's frustrating. But like you said, you're not alone. Clearly other folks are facing the same challenge. So that is interesting for us to know too. Anyone else?
I was doing a little show and tell of how we use, Facebook or Twitter and Instagram and versus LinkedIn. And, our LinkedIn efforts are focused on those professional positions, provider level, director, manager level, not so much the frontline staff, where our Instagram and Twitter posts are kind of more focused on driving folks to our Indeed page, to our job board on the website to generate that interest and share, more. The Instagram, Twitter is more of a cultural driver of hey, you're interested in working a chop tank, go over to those pages, take a look at what it's like to work there. What do we do for the community? How do we interact at work? Do we have fun? What are we doing and what are we talking about? Does our mission match our actions of what we're showing? And then, that's the driver to, I'll see what jobs they have available because that looks like a great place to work.
Nice. That's awesome. Yeah, that sounds like a really wise way to use those different platforms, to their highest use and in a way that makes the most sense for each of them, as like they have different audiences, they have different vibes, even the same audience using them differently, comes to it with a different perspective. So that's awesome. That makes a lot of sense. Cool. All right. Well, thank you both for sharing. We'll get back into our content now. Let's make sure it's yay. It did. So as we already mentioned, today we're going to talk about interviews. It's one of the final 3 steps in our recruitment step ladder. So you're almost there. Thank you so much for being here and sticking with it. So first, we're going to talk about phone screening interviews or just any kind of screening interviews in advance. So it's important to think about, once you begin to attract those candidates, to really carefully track the results. It's critical to respond quickly, of course, communicate often, and ensure that rapid turnaround of any questions, interviews, and site visits. And we do want to highlight that there's this Excel document, the candidate tracking sheet, that is part of the R&R plan template, but it's a separate document. And it's a tool for tracking applicants through the entire recruitment process. So, and of course, just like so many other things, it's editable. You can alter it and change it to meet your needs. So we want to just highlight that tool. And then, of course, it's important to get in touch. Once you receive that CV or resume from a candidate that you're interested in, contact them as soon as possible. We know that often when folks are applying to jobs, they are applying to other jobs that they're seeing that are similar. And so we don't want to be the folks that let a really good candidate just slip through our fingers because we didn't have time to contact them. And I will say from personal experience, when I am contacted quickly after I've applied for a job, that to me reveals an organized, attentive work culture. And so that in many ways it's a great first impression to make. And I have a lot of friends who've applied to jobs and then not heard back for 6 weeks. And but by the time they're hearing back of, oh, hey, we'd love to bring you in for an interview, they've already gotten hired. So it's just important to remember to, get those interviews scheduled, or at least get that contact going, so that you can, make that impression and also make sure that we're not letting the good ones get away. So in terms of the screening process for a phone interview, of course, you want to prepare your content ahead of time, and that includes an overview of the health center. Just like when we talked about writing the job postings and advertisements, you want to make sure that you're telling a story about the place that this candidate would potentially work. Then you want them to have a good understanding of who they'd be working for and with, and the community they'd be a part of and would be serving as well, of course. Obviously, you want to make sure you have your questions ready for the candidate and know what the next steps are so that when they ask that, you can answer. And then during the phone interview, similarly, you want to describe the health center, give folks an idea of what your organization is like, what your community is like, outline the position so that it's clear what you're making sure you're talking to someone who wants the position you have on offer, and then ask those predetermined set of questions. Of course, allow time for the candidate to ask questions, and then really be sure to listen closely to their responses and their questions. The responses people give are very important, but the question someone asks also reveals a lot about what kind of candidate they are. And then as you finish up the interview, be sure to, of course, share what those next steps are. What can the candidate expect next? What's the timeline, etc. And then, of course, thank people for their time. All our time is valuable, and having someone sit down with you to share about themselves and share interest in your organization is worth saying thank you for. And then after the phone interview, of course, this is more during, you want to record those responses, clean them up, make them easy to present the results to your recruitment team, see if there's any additional questions that you want to make sure you ask before you bring someone in for a second interview or an on-site visit, etc. Is there anything that you were left curious about, etc. Thinking about with your team if this candidate, based on what you know already, is a good fit. And then, of course, schedule that on-site interview or that second interview. It is important, of course, at this stage of the process to be really intentional about justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, or JEDI. We want to encourage folks to review applications with diversity and inclusion in mind, where possible, excluding information that could lead to bias. Obviously, at certain stages, all the information is going to need to be available, but there are certain things we can make sure to exclude that can help head off some of that bias at the beginning of the process, and maybe allow folks or make it so that we're not making decisions based on bias. One really good example of this is that there's a lot of studies that show that the same resume, one with a stereotypically Black name and one with a stereotypically white name, the resume with the stereotypically white name will get many, many more callbacks. And this is verified data, and it doesn't mean that the people who are doing that are bad people. We're all raised within these societies that create bias, and that is just the way it is. And so instead of beating ourselves up about that, just recognizing that bias exists and thinking about what are the ways we can try to work through it and lessen the opportunity for those biases to have these impacts, that's one way is, when you're getting a resume to your team to review, just take the name off. They don't, do you need to know someone's name to review their qualifications? So that's just, that's something to keep in mind. Of course, be aware of subtle and unintended bias when reviewing CVs and resumes. This goes back to that first point, but think about, do you have other biases around educational institutions, location of prior employment, the type of experience, someone's gender, etc. And then identify that list of core questions to be asked of all candidates. The questions should be as similar across candidates as possible, and they should all be related to the job description. Of course, if you were curious about something that someone brings up in an interview, you can ask follow-up questions, but to ensure that fairness, it's important to ask everyone the same questions. And then it is important along those lines too, to ensure that your search committee or your workforce team is aware of any illegal questions. And the interview process, like I said, it should be as close to the same for all candidates as possible. And then do consider that cultural differences can affect our first impressions of candidates. For instance, the standard interview in the United States uses the criteria of self-confidence, goal orientation, enthusiasm, and leadership, even though these qualities may not be apparent in people from more reserved cultures. So just thinking about how culture is influencing how someone is presenting, and whether the systems that we have set up disadvantage folks from different kinds of cultures. And then, of course, it's really important to reserve ample time for interviews and evaluations. We do know that bias emerges more when evaluators are limited by time pressure. And that makes sense, right? That when we're limited by time and we just need to make snap decisions, our minds revert to what's easiest, and bias is easiest. Again, it's baked into us, it's baked into our culture and our society. And we're not bad people for that, but if we give ourselves time to really be able to think it through, then we're less likely to act on those biases. And then finally, establish a diverse hiring committee. Committee members should really demonstrate an understanding of JEDI principles, and you can invite external partners if needed. If you're worried that you don't have folks with different identities and backgrounds already at your organization who could fill this role, you can ask folks from the board or other community members who will be affected by who this person is to be part of your recruitment committee or your interview panel. So there are ways to increase the diversity of your interview panel, even from outside of your organization. So still kind of thinking about JEDI, here's some questions to consider around JEDI for an interview. I'll read them aloud, but of course you'll have them available to you as well. So think about, again, these are just some options, and there are tons and tons of different questions, but these are just some we want to put out there. How's your background and experience prepared you to be effective in an environment that holds diversity, equity, and inclusion as core to our mission and values? Can you recall a time when a person's cultural background affected your approach to a work situation? What have you done to further your knowledge or understanding about justice, diversity, equity, and inclusion? And how have you demonstrated your learning? So part of the reason that we like these questions is they can work for folks from all different kinds of identities. And we want to make sure that when we're asking these kinds of questions, we don't ask them in a way that could be re-traumatizing for folks who do have historical and systemic trauma and oppression. And we want to make sure that it's open and affirming and reflects our organizations that, yes, our organizations have diversity, equity, and inclusion as core to our mission and values. And so it's reflecting that, but it's also not making folks feel uncomfortable or making folks feel like they need to divulge their trauma based on their identities to help recruiters understand how they will approach diversity, equity, inclusion, etc. And then it's important to, as you're asking these questions, to think about whether the candidates addressed different aspects of diversity beyond race and gender. Did they think about disability, neurodiversity, religion, other kinds of lived experiences? Do they have a clear understanding of what equity and inclusion really means? And do they appear to champion these values? And again, we want to be really careful and clear about how we ask these questions in a way to not force folks into feeling uncomfortable or to re-traumatize or to trigger anyone. And I also want to say that we know that these things can be taught. And so we're not saying that people have to have the perfect answers to these questions to be able to work at a health center. But they are important for you to know where your candidate is in these spaces before they start, to know, where they'll need to be brought up to speed in terms of the health center mission, et cetera. And so again, we want to ask these questions, but not necessarily have them be a deal breaker. Of course, if someone is hateful, like that's not going to work for our mission and vision and values. But if it doesn't have to be, the quote unquote perfect answer around these. We just want to make sure that we're at least starting to have that conversation during the interview. All right, so with all that said, now we'll talk about an on-site interview or a site visit and some things to be thinking about with this. To be honest, this is oriented towards provider recruitment or that like C-suite leadership recruitment, but it is something to keep in mind that you could think about for other positions. So there's a little caveat there. Of course, this is your opportunity to really showcase your health center and your community. It's a chance for you to get to know your candidate better, of course, and see if they'd be a good fit. But in the event that they are a good fit, you also want to make sure that they would be excited to accept the position and come to be part of what you've got going on in your community. So it's important to plan ahead, of course, think about who you want to be involved in this process. So who from the health center will partake and what will their roles be? But beyond that, are there community members you'd like to include? Are there patients, leaders, real estate agents, etc.? These folks can really help give candidates a warm welcome and make the idea of working for you really appealing. Again, this is more if you're bringing in a clinical provider from outside the community, but it's great to hire as much as possible from within your community. And what's best for your health center. This stuff we know is expensive, but as we've talked about, turnover is more expensive. And of course, this also has to be really sustainable. So think about what you're going to do that's right for you that can be repeated and sustainable. When you're thinking about logistics, think about travel, who's going to be making the trip, is it the candidate, are they bringing any family members, etc. What's the car, hotel, meal situation, the address of the health center, of course, or any other places of interest that you want to make sure that they get a chance to see. Thinking about the visit, think if there's any tours of sites that you want to show or the local hospital. Make sure that you have those meetings arranged with your support staff, providers, your CEO, your CMO. If they are bringing a partner, thinking about the partner itinerary. So would they be interested in seeing schools, childcare, realtors, and other community members, potential employers for the partner, etc. And then of course that joint itinerary, is there dinner or meeting with key staff for both folks involved, a dinner or meeting with other providers, and then a cultural or unique community event. And I'm going to pause there because I see that Jonathan put something in the chat. He says we put in our frontline staff, nursing MAs and front desk for shadow days so that they know what they're doing, are going to experience, and so that our teams get to know them and provide feedback into some of it or some fit. That's awesome. That makes a lot of sense. And we see that in other industries too, in the restaurant industry, it's called staging. Before you get to work at a restaurant, you stage and you make sure that it makes sense and you can vibe with the whole kitchen. So yeah, I love that. That's a great idea. Thanks for sharing. All right. So it's also important, of course, during COVID, but beyond, to think about virtual on-site interviews and or other kinds of how are we going to do this, moving forward. And if you're doing a virtual on-site interview, think of it in the same way that you would an in-person one. So bring in those different people, go on a virtual tour of the health center, think about how to be welcoming to your candidate's family in a virtual setting. And this is really an opportunity to get creative. We've heard of folks like putting on a GoPro and walking around the health center that way, to give a tour. There's all kinds of different ways we can be really innovative and creative. And this might make a lot of sense going forward too, in terms of that cost piece. Is this a way that we can cut down on cost of recruitment to ensure that sustainability, et cetera? So there's different options there, but we just want to encourage folks to be thoughtful and creative. And then, of course, if you do this is an example of a site visit interview, that on-site interview, so that you can really plan ahead. And this is part of, again, that R&R plan template. It is table 19. I know it's really hard to read, but it's just that whole itinerary set up. So again, this is just going to show that so much of what it takes to have a comprehensive workforce plan is in that template. And if you just plug it in, off a lot of it from your homework that you've already been doing, that will count as your comprehensive workforce plan, and it will help you as you move through things. So of course, after you've done that on-site interview, it's important to follow up with the candidate. So develop that plan, think about the frequency that you'll be following up with them, the timeline, the type of contact. Are you texting them? Are you calling them? Are you emailing them? Are you LinkedIn direct messaging them? And who's responsible for each part of that? So those are all the things to think about. And Jonathan already got us started with this, and we'd love to hear more from you, Jonathan, on this. But I'd love to hear a unique aspect of your on-site interview process or your site visit from everyone. What's one unique thing that you do as part of your site visit?
So we have a really nice eastern shore of Maryland is rural to the rest of the state and region, but it's a destination for folks from DC, from Baltimore, from other parts of the country. And there's a very nice hotel that is part of that destination, great wedding venue, very well known, that we've been able to partner with as our hotel partner and hospitality partner. And so when we have candidates coming in, we have the opportunity for a good rate to wine and dine them, give them breakfast or dinner at the hotel, put them up for an evening, and kind of treat them to that Eastern Shore hospitality. And then bring them in, for the in-person interviews on site for director level and above candidates. And so that's just one really great way to sell the shore, and to sell this community, and to have partner with somebody who can help us do that. So it doesn't have to be a well-known wedding venue. It can be the Quality Inn down the street. But at least having that, when they check in at the front desk, oh, you're here for Chop Tank, here's your welcome basket, with a couple things Chop Tank, a couple things from the Eastern Shore, get them engaged in our culture as an organization, but also as a community from second one.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. And we have a comment from Suzanne in the chat that the Eastern Shore is beautiful, and that's awesome. Yeah, I definitely agree. And I think that it's an opportunity too for us each to think about what is that thing in our community that we'd want someone to get to see. If if they have one day or even less than that, if they have an evening, what's the one thing that you're like, yes, this is the beauty. And I live in Denver, and Colorado is obviously a really beautiful place, so there's a lot of options there. But so much of what we see out, I have spent a lot of time in HRSA Region 8, and yeah, every community has something that makes them shine, and that is so beautiful, and that is worth showing off to a candidate. And I love that idea. That's great. And that partnership, like you said, of just like yeah, you've built out a partnership, and I can't imagine. I mean, I can't imagine how amazing I would feel if when I checked in, someone was like, "I know what you're here for, and here's a basket." That's amazing. Dorothy, did you have something you wanted to share?
Yeah, so I think I've shared this before. We work with our local Chamber of Commerce and get like restaurant certificates and maps and things like that. But I'm a transplant. I just came here about 6 months ago. So I always say, hey, I'm a transplant. I love it here. I'm trying to get them kind of hooked up with a buddy almost. And then our CEO moved here the same time I did. So the staff made all these recommendations on his first meeting, and I saved all of those. Like, these are places to eat. These are things to do. And so when they start, I have that resource for them from the Chamber of Commerce, but also from, the different staff members, and then my own experience to answer questions and just help them, get acclimated.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think it makes, I think that makes such a huge difference of just the difference between just starting a job or even going into interview for a job and going in to be welcomed into a community of like, we're excited you're here, and here's all the things we like that we think you might like. Like, that is encouraging and exciting, and would definitely make a candidate feel instantly more at home. So that's a great idea. I love that.
I just wanted to add to that. I do all the same things that Dorothy and Jonathan are doing. One of the things I've been doing, and again, this is for providers and for more of the C-suite, is I do a community tour. I take them out to all our clinics. I show them our clinics. I introduce them to our clinic leadership, staff, providers, key providers, and I really try to make them feel part of our culture as they're with us and interviewing with us as well. So
Yeah, that's great. And again, like Jonathan and Dorothy were saying, of just like that from moment one, they're connected and plugged in. I really love that. That's awesome. All right, great. Well, thank you all so much for sharing. I think you're obviously all doing incredible work. That's really wonderful. And yeah, getting those candidates in and connected, and like you said, Marissa, feeling like part of the culture. So that's really wonderful. Before we talk about the next session and next steps, does anyone have any questions on interviewing, site visits, or on, past homework? Any questions before we move on? All right, I'm not seeing anyone come off mute. Again, you can always put things in the chat, and we're available. You can ask questions through the dashboard. You can email us. We're very available. We'd love to hear from you if anything comes up as you're doing stuff. So before the next session, there is a new assignment on interviews and on-site visits, and it should be in the dashboard, I believe, later today. And then this, I know we offered this last time, but this is sort of an ongoing offer. Feel free to send any job announcements that you would like to be reviewed. We're happy to review them, and help add punch or pizzazz, or tell you you're doing an amazing job, or all of the above. So feel free to send those in. And then our next session is, nope, that's today. Our next session, I believe, is the 16th. Somebody on my team want to help me with this? I put the wrong date in. Anyway, the next session is, someone's going to grab that for us. And the next session is on contracts, onboarding, and we'll do a high level retention overview as well. Okay, it's not the 16th. I'm going to find it real quick. Okay, it's on the 23rd. The next session is
June 23rd. I just
on
put
the
it in the chat.
23rd, which, fun fact, is our executive director's birthday. So what a thrill. So yeah, that'll be our next topic for our next session. And again, Michelle will be doing that retention overview as well. We know it's Recruitment Boot Camp, but we just want to do a little high level on that. And then, of course, again, I know we plugged this last time, but our conference is coming up. It's going to be great. The program, or like there's a draft program out and the sessions look amazing. It'll be in DC, which of course is fun. There's also going to be a gala for the 50th anniversary of the National Health Service Corps. So if you're looking for an excuse to get all dolled up, that's a fun one. Come be with your peers in the Health Center movement, and especially focused on workforce. We'll all be there. We're a good time. So there's a plug for that. And again, you can access that website in the slides, which will be on the dashboard. Again, of course, we're always welcome to get in touch with us. That info@clinicians.org goes to Michelle, who I know isn't here today, but is available. So she actually looks at emails. And then you can also call us at 844-ACU-HIRE. I don't know what those numbers are off the top of my head. Also, all of us, our direct lines are listed on clinicians.org. So if you ever just want to call us, our numbers are there and available. That's all I have. I know I'm finishing a little bit early, about 4 minutes early, but does anyone have anything else they would like to share before we close it out? And of course, you should have just seen an evaluation pop up. Again, those evaluations are really important for us as we continue to grow and improve learning collaboratives in general, the Recruitment Boot Camp specifically, and this cohort super specifically, and BIPIC loves them. So as you're filling out that evaluation, is there anything anyone wants to ask, add, can share? If not, I'll just let you fill out your evaluations and I'll stop distracting you. Great. All right, well, thank you all so much for being here. Please, again, do fill out that evaluation. We'll just hang out for another minute or so while folks submit that. But if you've submitted it, that's your ticket. You're free to go. Thank you all so much for being here, sharing your experiences and your wisdom with your peers. We really appreciate it. And we look forward to seeing you on the 23rd.